In my talk today, I look at the manner in which civil service recruitment is being done now. The whole purpose of this recruitment and the social cost of this recruitment process. I call for your forbearance because this might take a bit long. The death of 3 young IAS aspirants in July 2024 is emblematic of all that is wrong with the civil service recruitment. No public body, be it the UPSC or any other body, can divest itself of its responsibility of the social consequences of any action of theirs. This is a basic principle of democratic behavior. I examined this question in 3 parts. 1, what is it all about? Why? What is the recruitment for? What is the job content? What is it for? That is one part. One part is that. What are we recruiting for? The other is the UPSC. That is devising a means of recruitment, an examination for recruitment. Obviously, that examination pattern and process should have a relationship with the first one. What is the job for? What is the job like? There has to be a connect between these two. And third, the unintended consequences of this type of pattern in the emergence of a parasitic business, of a huge business, a multi-billion rupee business, what is known by coaching centers all over the country, particularly concentrated in Delhi, which people call the Mecca of civil service coaching. This is my subject. Let us first confront some basic numbers. The latest numbers that I have is that in the last year, 1,400 vacancies were there for various government posts, of which, if I remember right, about 140 or so are for the IAS, Indian Administrative Service. The bulk of the other, the remaining, is what are called central services, which would include such very clearly defined services like the Indian Postal Service, the Indian Audit and Account Services, both the civil and the military, the railway services, the income tax services, all of which we know have very defined, specific areas of work where a lot of all this contrived glamour does not exist and need not exist. But somehow, I would not say somehow, maybe it is a course of history if you look at it, the Indian administrative service, which itself is a misnomer, it comes to that, has got some glamour about it, which probably draws all the young people of this country, the graduates of this country, to think of it as the final destination to which they should go, the final aspiration, the Himalayan heights of the career. Now, some of this glamour is probably attributable to the predecessor service, the Indian Civil Service, ICS. Which was formed around 1920 or so, which service, the ICS, was famously described by Jawaharlal Nehru as neither Indian nor civil nor service. Indian Civil Service. Now, they were really, the Britishers first, all the British people, they were really, people who were meant to parade before what they called the natives, to parade their exclusiveness. To some extent, that is what the empire wanted of them. To be miniature monarchs in the areas they function, so that this idea of imperialism got personalized in the lives of the ICS officers. It is true that the examinations that were conducted, the competitive examinations, were conducted on a different plane, in the sense that the early stages of the examination were all testing out the knowledge of these candidates on the European classics. You see this kind of exclusivity. And then when Indians came along later, after many years, they also, shall we say, followed the path of these white sahibs, becoming a kind of imitations of these British officers, perhaps more sahibs than the white sahibs themselves. The brown sahibs, more sahibs than the white sahibs themselves. They were in effect irrelevant to the conditions of the country. Let that remain. I have to jump a few hundred years and come to the reality as of now. And that is, the Indian Administrative Service was considered to be the successor of the ICS. And in the first few years, the Indian Administrative Service, their training and everything was conceived on the basis that they were the really inheritors of all that is exclusive and grand and separate from the rest of the population, and so it was. I have to come to my subject very quickly. All this has become totally irrelevant now. The Indian administrative service is a misnomer. There is nothing much to administrate. In 1992, the 73rd and 74th Amendment to the Constitution came into effect, which recognized the Panchayati Raj and the municipalities, the urban local bodies, as constitutional entities in the same way as legislative assemblies of the states, and at the center, the parliament. So these were the real constitutional entities that were going to be in charge, going to be administering, in charge of the administration of the local bodies. In 2009, the Administrative Reforms Commission of Veerappa Moily, they labored hard for 5 years, from 2004 to 2009. In a conclusion to that report, came out with an exercise in euphemism, which is a kind of softening the blow, which in effect said that the district collector's post will slowly recede in its importance and become just a functionary serving the local administration of the state. That is, the local bodies. They will be officers serving the local bodies. This is the change that has come. And although the state governments, not really the Kerala government, which thankfully has been delegating authority to the local bodies to a fair extent, although some state governments have been dragging their feet in the matter of delegation to the existing local bodies, which, as I said earlier, are constitutional bodies, constitutional entities, and therefore exist not at the mercy of anyone, they have been dragging their feet in proper delegation to them. But once the constitutional amendment has taken place in 1992, it is only a matter of time before this becomes a reality. But then you will ask that between 1992, when this constitutional amendment and the existence of these local bodies and acceptance of them as constitutional entities after 1992, we have about 30 odd years, and that is enough time for the evolution. But things are a bit slow in our country for various reasons, which I am not going into. But there is no denying at all, that the complexion and nature of the so-called Indian administrative service has changed for good, permanently. So I would like to draw the conclusion, not at all debatable, because it is as clear as daylight, that the Indian administrative service, with all that misnomer of administrative, is just another service in certain areas that are now available to them for service under the designated local authorities, and at the state level under the directions of the political executive, who themselves are representative of the people through our election process. So it follows logically that this Indian Administrative Service truthfully can be de-glamorized and brought down to what it is, just like any other service, like the Postal Service, Indian Postal Service, or Indian Forest Service, or the Indian Income Tax Service, and Indian Excise and Customs Service, and a whole lot of these central services. Therefore, when you talk about the recruitment of 1,400 officers for the vacancies that arise each year, and the chances are that it might go down marginally each year, we are talking of officers needed for various specific tasks and various specific areas. Therefore, this notion among young people and society at large that this is the final destination to which all young men and women should aspire to has to go, because it has no connection with reality. This being the case, 1,400 vacancies by its very nature, the bulk of it is all very well-defined, postal and railways and income tax and account services and all that, and 140 for these administrative services, which have been shorn of all this kind of unnecessary baggage of the colonial times. It is necessary, therefore, to devise an examination or to make such changes in the examination process which takes into account this reality. Now, I have to speak of the UPSC. The other one I have more or less dealt with, that this is the vacancies. The UPSC has a scheme in the, now all the civil services have been clubbed together, so you're recruiting not for this exclusive type of people, the successors to the ICS and all that is a lot of myth. We are recruiting for people of defined areas, so very functional in this matter. So, because there is this big rush of applicants, 12 to 15 lakhs of them, the UPSC has, for reasons of their own, and I do not question their wisdom in these matters because they ought to be having reasons, they have devised a two-stage approach. The first approach seems to be a kind of guillotine, a massacre, nothing less than that, where 99.1% of the applicants are finished off. And that is a pretty, extraordinary way of doing things, but so be it. I'm only looking now at some of the consequences that arise. The examination pattern is devised in such a way that this guillotine can fall effectively on these unsuspecting applicants, 14 or 15 lakhs of them. 99.1% of them are going to be finished off. How do they do that? Pretty simple, I would say. They have in their preliminary examination, I would even say the preliminary slaughter process, a scheme by which the two papers have lots of things added to it, so that the chances of elimination are very high. There is a famous dialogue in Lewis Carroll, the carpenter and the walrus looking at the poor oysters for dinner. He takes them along by saying, let's talk of all kinds of things, of ships and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings, and why the sea is boiling hot, and whether pigs have wings. So this kind of all kinds of things added on to these to the preliminary papers makes it an effective way of getting people out. But the trouble is, when you slaughter this kind of thing, you are also slaughtering some very reasonable candidates who ought to be in what is called the main list. It is in a manner inevitable, perhaps, though I would think that there are other ways, which of course is not my business today. There are other ways, of course, but then if you are doing this and packing this paper with all kinds of things, then you're also eliminating a lot of people who could possibly be considered as fairly good material for the next stage of the examination. I'll come to that in a minute, the content of the examination. I think that at any examination, the main things that have got to be tested are your comprehension skill. Whether in reading out something you are able to understand not just the word meaning, but what the idea is and how it is conveyed. And therefore, questions like whether the author of the passage is making any assumptions, or he is having some analogies, or what his tentative conclusion, and how is it derived, all these things come out of any reading. Therefore, I would say that this skill is a very basic skill. If university degree students who have passed the degree examinations or the postgraduate examinations do not have this, then of course it is a commentary on the quality of education which our universities are giving. The other is a very important thing, and that is the ability to write something. That comes in the main part, but still I would want to say that these are the qualities that have to be tested. Whether a person can write on a subject and argue a certain point of view with precision and economy of language, at the same time going to effective conclusions. Another ingredient which perhaps can be tested would be the reasoning ability. The ability to make sense out of a simple puzzle or something like that, which really doesn't require all this coaching. Now, what has happened because of this scheme of the examination is that no university graduate or postgraduate can straight away take the examination without the risk of being slaughtered in the first stage, and therefore the willy-nilly you have encouraged the growth of this coaching industry, which specializes in, it is ridiculous, it is almost like a Bollywood thing, a circus, Bollywood movie, which has a whole lot of content creators and notes writers and all of this thing. And all these unsuspecting graduates and postgraduates are fed this with this kind of notes and things like that. Tons of material, and if now of course digitalized, a lot of this stuff is being pushed through the throats of these people. Lots of this stuff is being generated. This is the reason for the emergence of these coaching centers. If the examinations were designed in such a way as to test the basic abilities of people without making it all this kind of thing, and they could be asked to take the examination soon after their graduation or post-graduation without giving them all this kind of time. This was what was happening in the early years of the examination. Now, with this kind of industry that has come into place, a 24,000 crore industry, from where does the money come? It is at a huge financial cost from the families. And the financial cost has got a social dimension in the sense that they have to borrow the money from various institutions or other people, or sell off their jewelry and things like that. So there is a social cost in this. There is also a social cost that comes out of the complete waste of 2 years to 3 years, sometimes more than that, of these young people who unsuspectingly go after these coaching centers and end up in elimination. There is a social cost in the sense of missed the opportunity cost. This could have been utilized by them to improve their skills. 2 years is not to be taken lightly. They could have improved their skills, joined some other institution, and a lot of other things that they could have done. Instead of that, they spent 2 years immersed in this examination. Some of them I know personally. Some of them have been turned to complete morons in the matter of writing, because these coaching centers have told them that you have to get bullet points and things like that, pack your essays with all the kinds of textbook authors and things like that. Then when you read that, you will find it doesn't make any sense, because they are not concluding anything, they are just putting bullet points. And all of them are into this kind of exhibition of what cannot be called essays, but only exhibitions of some kind of smattering of information, not knowledge, because it has not been processed well. So you have also a social cost in this misdirection of resources of young people, a social cost imposed on the parents, because they have to shell out about 2 lakhs in a year minimum for the board and lodging of these young people, their food, everything. So all this adds up to tremendous social cost. And then you got to ask yourself whether all this is acceptable. And somebody has to review it. And that is my point. That the UPSC cannot say that we have devised a system and a method to suit the purposes for which we are there, to eliminate as many as possible in the first round and keep the second round for a ratio, that is between the number of vacancies and the number of people who appear for the main examination, a multiple of 10 or something like that. This kind of smooth operation might be okay, but no public body can ever escape from the responsibility of the consequences of their actions. It is my point in this video that the time has come for everyone concerned, and particularly the UPSC, to review the system. And before that, for everyone concerned to be aware that the Indian Administrative Service is just another service among all the other services. And no one should have the notion that the Indian Administrative Service and getting there is some kind of an end to be aspired for. There are other things that we should aspire for, and that is the message that has to come out of this talk. Plus the fact that it is time to review this and not allow this huge social cost and scar on society.